Avrupa Birliği'ndeki yenilenebilir enerji sertifikaları raporunu sunmak için Argus'u davet edeceğiz. Argus İngiltere'den geliyor. Türkiye'de de çok değerli muhabirleri var. Enerji, ondan sonra commodity fiyatları ile ilgili raporları var. Kendisi hem kendi raporlarından hem de Avrupa'daki yenilenebilir enerji sertifikalarından bahsedecek. Ardından ben Türkiye'deki foton yarı yıl raporundan bahsedeceğim. İkisini kıyaslama fırsatı da bulmuş olacağız. Justin, hoş geldin.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. And herkese günaydın. Hopefully I said that correctly. I've been practicing it this morning. So, yeah, well, thanks to Jan for organizing the event and for inviting us here. It's great to be in Istanbul. Certainly a lot better than things are in London right now. So, yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here and great to see so many people from the industry all at this event. My name is Justin. I work at Argus Media. I'll give a brief introduction of what we do as a company, and exactly what I'm going to talk about now is the guarantees of origin, the renewable energy certificates market in Europe. So as a parallel to kind of what's happening in IREX, but very much focused on the European market. So just a quick word about Argus and what we do. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we're a price reporting agency. So we produce independent prices and benchmark prices for a range of commodities, as you can see on here. Everything from oil, oil products, derivative oil markets, electricity, gas, coal, also ferts, metals, agricultural commodities. And we're having a big push towards, I guess what you could use as an umbrella term being, net zero energy transition type market products. So we produce these price indexes and write news and analysis and commentary on what's driving the market prices. So as I said, I'm going to talk about the guarantees of origin in the European hub. This is within the AIB hub, which is mostly Western Europe. It started branching out a little bit more to Eastern Europe and Southern Europe, but it's very much contained within Europe. The standard of the contract, the EECS, the EECS certification system, is governing the rules of the standardized trade. So there's effectively a European hub where these certificates can be traded beyond countries fairly easily. So these are the products in particular that I'm focusing on now. So a little bit of context just to explain where the markets are generally going. It's no secret that European and global markets are moving towards more renewables, right? We are slowly getting away from coal, although this year it's made a little bit of a comeback because of the energy crisis and us needing to do whatever we can to have electricity in winter. But generally, nuclear has been phased out in Germany in particular. It's being extended a little bit now, but we won't be having any more nuclear there. And we've seen a huge increase in wind, solar. Hydro's pretty much stayed similar, but the share of renewables in the electricity mix has increased significantly over the last 20 years. You can see in the whole of Europe, so this includes Ukraine and Turkey, it's getting close to around a third of consumption these days. And in some of the Western European markets, like Germany, for example, it's actually close to around 50% a lot of the time. So we're getting a lot more renewable supply coming into the market, but also a lot more demand. And so these certificates are being used in the same way that IREX are for claiming that your consumption of electricity or your supply of electricity is renewable. So you do that by cancelling these AIB certificates within your own domain. So if you look at the chart, the total cancellations, you can see Germany in Europe is the largest user of all AIB certificates, renewable ones in particular. A lot of those are actually imported from other countries, in particular from the Nordics, and we'll talk a little bit about that very soon. The Dutch market is also a very big user of certificates. They have a full disclosure scheme there where all of your consumption needs to be matched with certificates saying where the electricity came from. So that's really pushed up demand there. And you can see over the last decade or so that demand for these certificates has continued to grow. This year, the stats which have come out up to the end of July show that we're pretty much on track to be above last year. And as the other presenters have spoken about, such initiatives as the RE100, people are generally moving towards wanting to have more renewables documented in their supply. So where is the supply coming from within the European markets? This shows the certificates that are issued by technology. You can see that hydro provides most of the renewable energy certificates, although it has started to lose share a little bit as more wind and solar power technology has come on board. But you can still see that hydro, as one source of supply, mostly coming from the Nordics as well, accounts for around a quarter of the total certificates that are issued every year in the ARB scheme. So that's the supply-demand side, very loosely. And what we're going to talk about now is the OTC market trade, which is the interesting stuff, right? The prices. What are the prices? Where's the trade? And what's driving the prices? So Argus, as a sort of news and price market analysis company, we source market data. This is OTC market data of trade that's done between counterparties. It's not a reflection of the entire renewable certificates market. It would be impossible to gather that information because a lot of the certificates are sold now on exchanges, also through PPAs, which they're bundled in with. But this gives you a good sense, at least, of what's going on in the OTC market. So bilateral trade, whether that's done via brokers or directly between counterparties. So what's happened this year? Now, as we mentioned, Nordic Hydro is traditionally the largest share of supply in the market. But this year, that's changed a little bit, and I'm going to explain why in a few more slides. But you can see this year, the Nordic Hydro traded volumes are down quite a lot, and there's been quite a big uptick in this one here, which is Europe Renewable. And that really gives your sellers a lot of flexibility as to where you can source your certificates from at the end of the year when it comes to transferring them to the buyers. So generally, Nordic Hydro still a huge share of the market, but it's quite clear that people are opting for this real sense of flexibility in where they can get their supply from. One of the things that's notable as well is that this Europe Renewable, which is the most generic type of renewable certificate you can have in the market, seems to be replacing the biomass renewable certificate these days because, again, people seem to be switching to this and favoring that a little bit. So that's the where the liquidity is moving. So what about the prices? Well, if you take away the fact that it says Nordic Hydro and the units here, I mean, this could be a price chart for any commodity in the last few years, right? Everything is more expensive. And so we're going to have a little look at why this is happening. We just skip forward one more. There's a really interesting point here, which was around summer this year. So traditionally, you would have a technology spread with renewable certificates. Your biomass would be the cheapest because, well, there are some questions about the renewable credentials of biomass. I'm not going to get into that. Then you would move up with hydro. Again, some people have some issues with the environmental concerns of building hydro plants. And then you would be stacked up with your wind and solar, which are the best renewables, if you like. So there was traditionally that price premium in the market. But in summer this year, as you can see here, things started to change a little bit. And the Nordic Hydro started to move above the other technologies. We can just skip to the next slide. You can see this in a little bit more detail here. So you've got the Nordic Hydro, the biomass, the wind, and the solar. And Nordic Hydro was the most expensive. And the current year products, so similar to IREX, these are traded by the annual vintage in which they're generated. The current year also moved to a premium to the curve, you know, the contracts further out. So this was interesting. And so we were trying to figure out why this happened. We can skip. Yep, here we go. So the price drivers. We were all alive in summer. It was really hot, right? We are in potentially some kind of climate crisis. We had really extreme weather conditions across Europe, super hot. Italy experienced its worst drought pretty much ever. And as we already saw, the hydro is one of the largest sources of supply in the market. We can just skip one and it will highlight a couple of points on this chart. So this is looking at hydro reservoirs in certain parts of Europe. So the Nordics being the largest supplier of hydro in the market. And here we look at the Alpine countries. So an average of the French, Austrian, and Swiss hydro stocks. You can see a couple of points this year, the hydro stocks had moved down significantly from the long-term averages and also below last year's levels because it was dry, it wasn't raining, it's quite simple, so less supply in the certificates market. They've started to recover a little bit now because there's obviously some concerns in winter about if there's going to be enough gas for power generation and if there's going to be enough coal for coal generation. So we're getting a sense that some of the hydro producers are doing what they can to hold back a little bit in winter, which is probably a good idea. Also looking at the price drivers, so generally the supply-demand picture. So obviously the more demand there is, electricity demand, you're going to have higher demand for the renewable certificates. Demand this year was a bit of a mixed picture. If we look at Q2, this being the last full quarter, not considering we are pretty much at the end of the current quarter anyway, but we can see that Germany and France demand was a little bit lower than last year, but it was still way up from 2020 when we were deep in COVID. Demand is an interesting one because now obviously the energy costs are so high, electricity, gas and coal, so we are seeing some industrial companies start to reduce their production a little bit, which can have an impact on demand. Italy demand was higher because it was really hot, lots of air conditioning demand in Italy. On the supply side, so a lot of the renewable certificates are coming from wind. Again, a bit of a mixed picture. So in some countries, France, we had slightly lower wind in Q1, which is generally the windiest quarter. And Germany, it was higher than it was last year, but not as high as it was in 2020. So these are all quite important drivers to look at in terms of what's moving the prices. Yeah, thank you. So another thing that's quite an interesting development in these is a lot of the certificates are traded via auctions. France launched its auctions last year. And in April, there was quite an interesting development in the French market where they decided to move to monthly matching with their certificates. So basically, the certificates that you buy have to be generated in the same month which you're matching the consumption to. These are monthly auctions with a 4-month delay in terms of the generation, but suddenly the demand increased massively, and this sent quite a strong signal to the OTC market, which is more people wanted to buy on a more temporal, granular basis. So you can see going from April up until now, we had the last auction this month. The prices have just gone up and up and up. The blue and black lines represent the volumes offered and the volumes sold. And you can see since April last year, every single auction is sold out all the time. People need to buy these GEOs, and buying them on the exchange, these are held by EX, is a convenient way to do that. There's a couple more auctions which have just started up this month. Hupex, the Hungarian power exchange, and EPEX Spot, the French exchange, they're both holding pan-European auctions now. So it's basically the same thing. You can buy any of these AIB certificates on those auctions. Okay, just have a quick look at some things that can have an impact on where the market could be moving. We know that things are moving towards more renewables, and countries are very much pushing to get more renewables in their market. Germany has come out with some incredibly ambitious renewable targets. They revised all these in their Easter package in spring this year. They're now looking to have around 300 gigawatts of solar by 2035, which is it's a lot. It's a lot. You can see they're nowhere near that at the moment. So whether or not that will materialize, we will see. But the same in all other countries pretty much around Europe. France, they're looking to get a lot of solar, around 40 gigawatts by the end of the decade. And Italy is also as well is pushing to have a lot more solar increased. Italy is renowned for having very slow permitting procedures in terms of getting renewables installed, particularly solar. But they are starting to loosen those a little bit. So there's a possibility that some of these targets might actually be realized or close to being realized. One other thing to note up here about Germany. Germany, which has lots of renewables, lots of wind, lots of solar, within their energy law, they have a rule stating that you can't claim subsidies and also GOOs. So a lot of the renewables in the German market don't have certificates that they can sell within the AIB hub. But this is changing for 2 reasons. One, last year, a lot of these old wind farms had 20-year subsidies, and they've started to come to an end now. So around 4 gigawatts came out of the market last year, and there's roughly around 2.5 gigawatts coming out each year, although that has accelerated now because what's happened is power prices are so high that a lot of renewable producers have realized they can exit the subsidy scheme, then just sell power on the open market and claim GOOs. So you've potentially got a lot more supply coming in from the German market. Just one quick mention about the UK. One thing that we're very good in doing in the UK is, as well as destroying our currency and general economy, is isolating ourselves from the rest of Europe. So after Brexit, the UK scheme, which was linked with the European one, you were able to export the UK REGOs, Renewable Energy Guarantees of Origin, and also import the EU GOs. You can't do that anymore from April next year. So suddenly, you can see up here, this shows all the European GOOs that were imported into the UK from Europe. They can be used to offset subsidy schemes as well as used in your fuel mix disclosure. So last year, there was around 42 terawatt hours of European GOOs that were exported from Europe to the UK. And in the previous year, so this is April to April compliance period in the UK, there was nearly 70 terawatt hours. So from April next year, you're effectively taking away this much demand from the European market. It fell quite a lot last year, which was mainly because there was some slight change in the scheme in how you could export. You basically had to match up power flows with the GOOs, and we had a lot of problems on one of the interconnectors with France. But from April next year, that's going to be zero. So for the REGOs, that's been pushing up prices a lot. Again, you can see on this price chart, which shows the REGOs split by the two technologies they're traded in, one being biomass and one being non-biomass, which is effectively wind, solar, and hydro. But the prices, like the European GOOs, a couple of years ago were around 30 pence, and now they are not 30 pence, they're around £8. And the impact obviously is going to be there's going to be more demand for REGOs and less supply from the EU coming in. So we'll probably see UK REGO prices going up even more in the short term. Just a few other things to watch out for in the way that the market's developing for European GOOs. The energy community has been pushing a project for a regional GOO market within the Western Balkans. It was supposed to start sometime around now. So yeah, it could be sometime later this year or maybe next year. I think everyone has got a lot of other things that they need to address before potentially putting in a regional GOOs market, like making sure that we have enough energy to cook and heat things in winter. So obviously this is not a huge priority, but it's something they've been working on for a while. RED 3, some of the proposals that are being put forward here are for all GOOs to be issued for all generation, so including those that have subsidies. Also looking at thermal and fossil fuel-fired generation, so potentially more supply there. There's also the concept of full disclosure, which I mentioned already exists in the Netherlands, where every megawatt hour of consumption needs to be matched by a megawatt hour saying where that electricity has come from. So if that's implemented in any countries in Western Europe, you're going to get a huge increase in demand for GOOs there. I talked about the auctions already, so we've got the French one, EEX. There's quite a few others in Europe: Croatia, Luxembourg, Portugal. The UK does have auctions as well. But now HOOPEX and EPEX Spot have just launched pan-European auctions, which will take place on a monthly basis. They had the first ones this month. HOOPEX got in there just before EPEX Spot, and they sold, I think it was around a terawatt hour. And then the EPEX one did not sell as well, and I think they sold like 20 gigawatt hours or something. But these will be taking place monthly now, so keep an eye out for those. Norway always has this issue of should they be exporting all their GOOs because it makes their residual mix look bad. The government is constantly deciding whether or not they should withdraw from the market. They're still in the market at the moment, but there's always the slight hint of you may lose Norwegian supply, which would have a huge impact on the market. Next slide. Okay. Yeah, just an explanation really of what we're doing in the market. So these are relatively opaque markets. They're not like power and gas where everything is traded on a screen. They're done mostly bilaterally or through various trading platforms or brokers. So our job is to produce these independent price indexes, which we do for the sort of large generic technologies, Nordic hydro, European wind, solar and biomass, UK for the REGOs. And we do it for the previous year, current year, and 3 years forwards. So we produce these prices every day, mostly backed by deals that are done in the market, also having visibility on the bids and offers that are put in the market. And we are completely independent of any platform or any participant in the market. This is our interpretation of a fair market price. So these tend to be used in indexation in contracts, mark to market for signing PPAs or things like that. You can have them embedded as a sort of floating element of a PPA. Risk management companies like them because, again, we have no actual activity in the market ourselves. These are completely independent prices, producing a fair valuation of the market. Alongside these, we produce the specifications of the deals that we're using to back these assessments up, as well as some fundamental data sets. So things like power plant projects for renewables, the auction data, and also the hydro stocks, which you saw in the previous slide. Just one more. So what are we looking at doing now? We're here for the Photon Platform event. They are trading IREX, and we've just launched some similar price indexes for Turkish IREX for 2 years, so previous year and the current year, again by technology, so wind, solar, hydro, and biomass, which we produce on a weekly basis. And we'll be looking to develop some other markets fairly soon. Globally, they will be coming quite quickly, so keep an eye out for those. One more slide, I think. We're also looking again from a renewable certificate perspective, biomethane, which is a hugely growing market and lots of interest in these. So looking at the Danish and the UK markets for those. Again, similar methodology. We have interaction with the market to find out what trades, bids and offers are going around in the market, and then we produce our weekly indexes for these. I think that's it. Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Teşekkürler Justin. Are there any questions for Justin? Soruları Türkçe'de alıp sorabiliriz. Yeah.
I have a comment on the Balkans as a person who is slightly involved. It's not that somebody needs heating up, it's just that the energy community suggested project doesn't have much takers among the energy community countries, so any country is free to take it and implement it for a while already, but it begs the question why or not they are very much interested in it. No.
Yeah, thanks.
Eğer soru yoksa hemen Photon'un sunumuna geçeceğim. Türkiye'deki yenilenebilir enerji sertifikaları piyasası nasıl? Web sitesini alabiliriz.